Hi, I'm Jeff Tobe and I am Coloring Outside the Lines. Welcome to Coloring Outside the Lines, Creative Problem Solving. The first part of today's discussion is going to focus on that creative. So let me ask you a question. How many of you truly believe you are one of the most creative people you know? I can't see you, but all of a sudden I know that your eyes diverted from the screen somehow because you didn't want to get picked. I don't know why people say they're not creative. I truly believe everyone's creative. When were we most creative in our lives? All of us. When we were kids, right? I asked a question last week on a live presentation and the guy said when I was dating. That's not what I was looking for. No, it's when we were kids. So it didn't just fall off. I mean, it's there inside every one of us. But what I want to explore today is how do you use that natural creativity to your advantage in problem solving every single day? You know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I walk around all day saying, nobody likes me, what happens? Nobody likes me. And if I walk around all day saying, I'm not creative, I'm just not the creative type, guess what? You're not. So the first step is telling yourself you are one of the most creative people you know. So I do want to ask you a question. The question is this: why be more creative at what you do? Why? Put your answer in the chat box. Why be more creative at what you do? I love those answers. As a matter of fact, putting them all together, I see them often. I see things like new solutions, right? Problem solving, of course, is why we're here today. But just things about less stress and being more creative allows us to look at things differently from a different perspective. All of those are the right answer. So today I want you to think about the why of being creative when it comes to problem solving. I want to share a story with you. And the story is called The Gorilla Story. Now, this story starts with a cage containing 5 gorillas and a large bunch of bananas hanging above some stairs in the center of the cage. Before long, a gorilla goes to the stairs and starts to climb toward the bananas. As soon as he touches the stairs, all the gorillas are sprayed with cold water. After a while, another gorilla makes an attempt and gets the same result. All the gorillas are sprayed with cold water. Every time a gorilla attempts to retrieve the bananas, the others are sprayed. Eventually, they quit trying and they leave the bananas alone. Well, one of the original gorillas is removed from the cage and replaced with a new one. The new gorilla sees the bananas and starts to climb the stairs. To his horror, all the other gorillas attack him. After another attempt at attack, he knows that if he tries to climb the stairs, he'll be assaulted. Next, the second of the original 5 gorillas is replaced with a new one. The newcomer goes to the stairs and is attacked. The previous newcomer takes part in the punishment with enthusiasm. Next, the third original gorilla is replaced with a new one. The new one goes for the stairs and is attacked as well. 2 of the 4 gorillas that beat him have no idea why they're participating in the beating of the newest gorilla or why they're not permitted to climb the stairs. After the 4th and 5th original gorillas have been replaced, all the gorillas that were sprayed with cold water are gone. Nevertheless, no gorilla will ever again approach the stairs. Why not? Why not? Well, you might say things like they're going to get beat up. Yes, literally. But the thing that comes to mind, especially as it applies to problem solving, is this. TTWWADI. What does that stand for? That's the way we've always done it. Have you heard that from your team? Have you heard that from your kids? Yeah, but that's the way we've always done it. And that's the hurdle we have to get over first in being creative in problem solving. I call it the "that's the way we've always done it" syndrome. I love this meme or this comic. Yeah, I'll let you read it. I think it gets a point across. So we've got to get past the "that's the way we've always done it." And then we have to think about things from perspective. Perspective is everything in problem solving. I once heard a sales trainer say, if you see the world through your customer's eyes, you'll see the way your customer buys. I love that. See, you can substitute the word customer for a team member, for a spouse, but the point is this: we have to see the world from their perspective, not ours. So I like to use video as an example. Here's a quick example of perspective. See what you think.
How much are they asking?
Well, that's a lot of money for a deck.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but you're getting robbed. Did you hear me?
You're getting robbed.
Okay, that's perspective, right? His and theirs. Anyway, let's go on. I want to introduce you to something that I developed in my book, Coloring Outside the Lines. It's called the Harvey Principle. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Harvey with Jimmy Stewart, but if you haven't, I watched this movie as a kid and I took it at face value. Very entertaining. Jimmy Stewart's character is the only one who can see this 6-foot white invisible rabbit that he's named Harvey. Well, about 10 or 12 years ago, I rented it to watch with my daughters, and for some reason, I watched it from a whole different perspective. Even if you've never seen the movie, at the beginning of the movie, they want to commit Jimmy Stewart's character to a mental institution. He's obviously crazy. He's the only one who can see this 6-foot white rabbit that he's named Harvey. But watching from a different perspective by the end of the movie, I started to question whether or not he was the crazy one. Maybe, just maybe it was everybody who couldn't see Harvey who was crazy. And I started to think, how does that affect our professional lives and how does that apply to problem solving? Well, it's a whole chapter in the book, but the bottom line is this. It's learning to see invisible opportunities where everyone else sees only visible limitations. Let me say that again. Learning to see invisible opportunities where everyone else says it can't be done. Where everyone else says, we tried that 5 years ago before you got here, it doesn't work. Where everyone else says, you can't do that in this industry. That's where the creativity and problem solving comes in. Training ourselves and our team to see invisible opportunities where everyone else sees only visible limitations. So one more video. I think this might be a missed opportunity. It's a very quick video, so watch this. Poor guy. Yeah, learning to see invisible opportunities. How about this? A logo that I know you see every single day on a truck going by, a van going by, or a parcel you send. What's hidden in the FedEx logo? Put it in the chat box. That's right. Yeah, there's a giant arrow between the E and the X. Okay, now I'm hoping that some of you had never seen that before, right? Yeah, and by the way, it's on purpose as well. But for those of you that didn't see it, those of you who did will agree with me that we have just officially driven you crazy. No, you don't understand. You will never again see the FedEx logo the same way. I can prove it to you. Just before COVID and a while back, but I was traveling and I was going through Minneapolis, Minnesota airport. And I was sitting doing some work and looking out the window and I see a FedEx plane taking off down the runway. And I was saying to myself, don't see it, don't see it, don't see it, don't see it, don't see it. Ah! You can't help but see it, right? Why? Because our left brain, that analytical, detailed part of our brain is trained to read it and move on, read it and move on. Kind of how most of us are trained when we sit down to solve a problem. Solve the problem and move on. Next problem, move on. When in fact, now that I've made your right brain, the creative side of where what we'll call the opportunity, your right brain will kick into it every single time. My question is this, what's right in front of you? It's an opportunity waiting to happen, but you've never allowed your right brain or the right brain of your team to kick in to look at it differently. I had the privilege of speaking in India about 4 years ago, and I showed this same slide, and a young lady came up to me afterwards and she said, yes, but Mr. Tobe, what about the measuring spoon in the other E? Yeah, if I have to see it, you have to see it every single time. So I want to pause here and just say, enter the code CREATE and to win prizes and earn points. Yeah, I think you know what I mean. All right, let's go on. So it's about seeing the world through their eyes, not yours. And the second piece to this is giving yourself what I call an ask, an alternative solution kick. It simply means that when you know you've got the right answer, are you willing to set it aside and say there's always, always, always a second right answer? You know, historically, every invention, every creative idea, every innovative company started because somebody dared to look for the second right answer. So I have a challenge for you. I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. I'll take a couple seconds, give you some time. Okay, here's your challenge. As quickly as possible, I want you to draw a coffee cup. Draw a coffee cup. Doesn't need to be an artist rendering, just draw a coffee cup. All right. Yeah, some of you are still drawing. That's okay. Does it look something like that? I'm betting that the majority of you do something like that. Now that is an artist rendering. But hold on a second. I recently asked a group to do this, and somebody sent me their drawing from the top, looking down. Interesting. It's still a coffee cup. And then just recently somebody sent me their drawing, and it was the bottom looking up. Still a coffee cup. And wait a sec, how about the fact that it might be a Starbucks looking coffee cup? Or something that looks like that? Or something that looks like this? They're all the right answer. So when you know you've got the right answer, give yourself an alternative solution kick. Tell yourself there's got to be another right answer. Thanks for playing along. And by the way, I love this sign. I think it's the second right answer. When we're talking about coffee cups, it fits in perfectly. I'll let you read it. All right, there are so many obstacles that can get in our way when we're trying to solve problems. I'm not sure if this is the second right answer, but this comic makes a great segue to our next focus, which is the 4 steps in problem solving. Without them, we are doomed to make the same mistakes we've always made. Those 4 steps are: 1, define the problem; 2, generate alternatives; 3, evaluate and select an alternative; and 4, implement the solution. So there you have it. Good luck and happy problem solving. No, I wish it were that easy. Let's do a deep dive into each. You know, Albert Einstein said, if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. Those were wise words, and from what I've observed, most organizations or individuals don't heed them when tackling a problem. If you're not rigorous in defining the problem in the first place, you'll miss opportunities, waste resources, and end up pursuing innovation and initiatives that aren't aligned with your strategy. How many times have you seen a project go down one path only to realize in hindsight that it should have gone down another? How many times have you seen that innovative program deliver a seemingly breakthrough result only to find that it can't be implemented or it addresses the wrong problem? Many organizations need to become better at asking the right questions so that they tackle the right problems. So, how do you figure out how to do all this? Well, as an example, I was doing some customer experience training with a long-term care facility in Pennsylvania. Someone in leadership complained that meal prep time was slowing down, and so meals weren't getting to the residents in time. They assigned one of the kitchen staff the problem and the responsibility to solve it. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, but you have to ask A, if this is the right person to solve the problem, and B, does this person have the authority to get things done? As you'll hear in a couple of minutes, it's important to get senior management and frontline staff involved when solving any problem in the organization. So I asked if I could observe the kitchen when they were prepping meals. It's a long story, but I realized that their main vendor was delivering fresh produce too late in the morning to meet their schedule. I simply asked why they couldn't deliver earlier or even the day or evening before. The answer I got was, we already thought of that. They can't change their schedule, unfortunately. I said, then change the vendor. This example is like many I've seen. Someone in the bowels of the organization is assigned to fix a very specific near-term problem. But because the organization doesn't employ a regular process for understanding the big picture, they miss an opportunity to address the real issue or issues. You see, it's all about reframing the problem and, like I said earlier, looking at it from a whole different perspective. Just before COVID, we were looking after my 2-year-old great niece one day. After her nap, I found her on the bedroom floor sobbing. She was pulling her little hair. When I asked her, what hurts? She said, my hair. I was convinced we were going to the ER right away with some head injury, right? Then I asked her why her hair hurts. She said, because I'm pulling it. Reframing a problem is the process of looking at the same problem from a different perspective. Reframing is a technique used in psychology to deal with emotions, but also in design thinking to find innovative solutions. Often, without reframing the problem, you're searching for answers to a question that isn't the right question to ask in the first place. So, let me share my 7 tips on how to reframe the problem. The R stands for rethink the premise. Rethink the premise and find out what your stakeholders' actual problem is. To find really creative solutions, you must ask 3 questions in this order. Number 1 is how. How is this a problem? Is it really a problem? Why do we care? Often you'll find that once you ask the how question, you might realize that the issue at hand is actually not a problem and therefore shouldn't be solved. You might think of something as a problem, while others might see it as a benefit. Before you attempt to solve a problem, first see if it's really a problem, not only to you, but also to those of others affected by it. Understanding what makes this a problem will also help you develop the criteria to compare and access possible solutions. If you determine that this is the real problem, move on to the second question. If not, you're done. The second question is why. Why did or does it happen? What's the root cause of the problem? So I'm going to ask you to use the 5 whys method of asking why every time an answer is given. I saw this work beautifully with a tech company I'm consulting with. Now, the language was completely foreign to me, but the 5 why methodology worked. Here's how it went. The server crashed. Why did the server crash? Because a new API was pushed to that server. But why was that? It's because we just launched a new feature that used that API in the wrong way. Why did that happen? It's because we had an engineer who was new and didn't know how to use that API properly. Why is that? It's because that engineer was never trained properly. And why is that? Because their manager doesn't believe in that kind of training. 5 whys. So, what seemed like a technical problem of the server crashing turns out to be a managerial problem with the engineer's manager. You may not need to ask why 5 times, but you'll most likely have to ask it more than once. The problem in not asking why enough times is that you might get to a symptom, but not really the cause. Everyone then works to fix that symptom, but you wouldn't really fix the problem as a whole. There's a great story about a company that made toothpaste and had a problem when some of the toothpaste packages came down the line empty. They contracted the services of a very expensive consulting firm who modified the production line with a scale, that weighs things. And when it sensed a light package, it would stop the line automatically. The total cost with consultants, equipment, never mind time lost, was in the tens of thousands of dollars. In the meantime, while they were working on this, the story goes that one of the employees came up with his own idea. He put a $20 fan on the line before the scale so that empty packages would be blown off the production line before they even reached the scale. While the story exemplifies how simple, creative solutions may be better, it doesn't continue to suggest what they should have really done. Ask why some of the packages were empty in the first place. So keep asking why until you find the root cause. That's the most effective way to solve the problem. The third question to ask when rethinking the premise of the problem is what? What should you do to solve the problem? See, the first 2 questions would have helped you establish where you are, what's the root cause of the problem, and where you want to be, the negative outcomes you want to avoid. Now, it should be easier for you to brainstorm ideas to eliminate the root cause so that the negative outcome will disappear. The second tip in how to reframe a problem, and the E in our acronym, is engage the right people in the right context. Without key players' input, problem solving is doomed from the beginning. Remember the story I just told you about meal prep at the long-term care facility? Asking someone who works in the kitchen to solve it by themselves is not the right approach. Find the right people, those who are impacted directly and those who manage those who are impacted directly. Show them, interview them. The more you know about the context of the problem, the better. Our third tip in reframing a problem is focus on the why. Not the why we just discussed, but why is this important to the stakeholder? You'd be surprised how many times people never discuss why people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or why are they doing what they're not supposed to be doing. You know, it's without knowing why, you can build the most engaging solution with no actual impact. Engaging the right people in the right context will help you to get to the heart of the matter. Surprisingly, the answer might be completely different when you actually hear from leadership, supervisors, or how about the residents themselves. Number 4 is rephrase the problem. Now that you know who's involved and what's holding them back, it's time to rephrase the original problem. At the end of the 1800s, the leading manufacturer of typewriters, right, remember those, was a firm by the name of Scholes and Glidden. Well, they were approached by Remington because Remington wanted to buy the company, but they had a kind of a huge problem. Scholes and Glidden's typewriters keys stuck. Now, the keyboard didn't look anything like it does today. The top row were numbers, the next row were capital letters, and the others were lowercase. And they were alphabetical, not what we have today. And the keys were at least double the size they are now. I don't know about you, but I remember having to reach in and undo keys when I was young, so imagine what it was like then. So Mr. Scholes himself gathers all of his brain trust around to tackle the problem. To their credit, or maybe because they were so narcissistic, they reframed the problem, rephrased it. They said something like, "It's not our fault that the keys are sticking, it's the typist's fault. They're typing too quickly." So what did they do? They came up with the most inefficient keyboard they could put together to slow down the typist, and that's what we use today. QWERTY, if you're familiar with it, and they sold the company. Number 5, and the A in our acronym stands for assume nothing. You probably know what happens when you assume. Well, I'm not going to tell you, but ask somebody you trust sometime. The golden rule of innovative problem solving is that you don't assume anything. Just because TTWWADI thinking exists, it doesn't mean things are set in concrete. I think shaking bad concrete foundations is what a problem needs. If you want to be an effective problem solver, you have to learn how to stop making assumptions. Otherwise, you risk destroying your credibility. In life, there's no such thing as perfect information. Countless daily decisions are made based on an incomplete picture of the world, and those gaps in knowledge are often filled by assumptions. Assumptions can be harmless or even positive, but assumptions are risky and can often be detrimental. Problems arise when people respond to a situation in the absence of sufficient knowledge, particularly when emotions are heightened. You see this all the time. That's why you can't leave problem solving to a person whose reputation or even their job depends on solving it. Too many emotions involved. When you assume, you impart your own perspective, motivation, and values on a situation. Through that lens, if you're not careful, you can distort your perception of reality, which can lead to irrational decisions. I've seen it over and over again. The difference between a strong problem solver and an inept one is their ability to recognize their relative ignorance and become more informed before making a decision. By doing this, we use facts, outside opinions, and empathy to overcome our biases and achieve outcomes better to succeed. The goal is to make as many sound, coherent decisions as you can, as fast as is reasonable, but not 1 second faster. Number 6 is make lots of bad ideas. Brainstorm ideas, do it individually. Allow everyone to come up with as many solutions as they can. Go for quantity. To have a good idea, you have to have lots of crappy ones. Research shows that brainstorming is more effective when done individually first. This allows the introverts, the slow but creative thinkers, to contribute before they conform to the loud extroverts. We'll talk more about various brainstorming techniques in a few minutes. Hearing people, though, call your idea crazy or bad can be a sign that you're working on something nobody else understands yet. And that's exactly where we might want to play. A lot of the motivation behind dismissive feedback is you were doing something that is weird or strange. So a lot of our reaction is to immediately shut it down and say, no, that's bad. What we really mean is it's actually interesting, but could be dangerous. And that gets translated as that's a bad idea. Listen, Apple started off selling DIY computer kits. PayPal began as a way to beam money between Palm Pilots. YouTube began as a video dating site. Each of these in their day must have seemed like bad ideas, yet these companies obviously become the biggest players in now enormous fields. Instead of killing ideas and initiatives outright when they seem problematic or bad, challenge or push your team to push further. Rephrase the problem and solution and explore alternatives. It's these very challenges to seemingly bad ideas that can end up leading to breakthroughs. Number 7, and the other E, is explore potential solutions. Harvest time. Put all the ideas on the table. Time to bring the team together to filter out potential solutions. Eliminate by desirability, feasibility, viability. Build prototypes to test. We're going to talk about this in the 4th step to problem solving. So, defining the problem allows us to focus on the problem, not just the symptoms.
The second step to problem solving is to generate alternatives. Creative problem solving is a way of using your creativity to develop new ideas and solutions to problems. What I failed to mention is that the process is based on separating divergent and convergent thinking styles so that you can focus your mind on creating at the first 2 stages and then evaluating and implementing at the last 2. So, we're still in the creative phase, which is where I happen to feel most comfortable. And this is another thing to think about. Look at your problem-solving team and make sure that you have a good mixture of thinkers and doers. Even if you're solving a personal problem, be careful who you discuss it with. Get both left brain and right brain thinkers on your team. It'll make things much easier. Ideas are the key to innovation. Without them, there isn't much to execute, and because execution is the key to learning, new ideas are necessary for making any kind of improvement. It's obvious that ideas alone won't make innovation happen, as you need to be able to build a systematic process for managing those ideas. The point isn't just about generating tons of them, but about paying attention to the quality of them as well. I agree that it can sometimes be difficult to come up with more of those high quality ideas. It's not unusual to get stuck in our old habits and routines when we're supposed to be creating something new. So, although problem solving isn't about ideas alone, they are an important part of the equation, as there wouldn't be one without the other. In this step, I'm introducing you to a word that may be somewhat unfamiliar to some of you. The word is ideation. You see, ideation is the capability for generating, developing, actualizing, and communicating ideas. Ideation is an essential part of the design process, and that's at the heart of design thinking. Ideation is highly scientific, just not the kind of science they teach in a chemistry lab or in graduate business schools. I'm getting too far into the weeds here, but suffice it to say that the process of ideation replaces the 4-step problem-solving process we're talking about today. Let's take a closer look at some of the barriers you should sort of tear down when you want to run or participate in a successful ideation session or a brainstorming session. The first is having an inexperienced facilitator. I think this is self-explanatory. When I facilitate ideation or brainstorming sessions for clients, it's usually because they tried an untrained internal resource who just didn't know the process. Number 2 barrier is an unfriendly space. We'll talk more about this in a minute when we delve into brainstorming. Number 3 is having unclear goals. With ideation, unlike brainstorming, you need a clear goal and then you work backwards to ensure you meet that goal. The fourth obstacle to successful brainstorming or ideation is egos and hierarchy. Need I say more? Number 5 obstacle is closed-mindedness. Sometimes if people are too close to the problem, and sometimes if they're too far removed from the problem, they become very defensive and closed-minded. And number 7 is limiting ideas. There may be a natural tendency for teams to cut their sessions as soon as they have a few superficial, good enough ideas. The 8th obstacle is early judgment. Here's a saying I can get into trouble using, but I think it proves the point. Premature evaluation prevents conception. You'll remember it, won't you? The 9th and final obstacle is groupthink. We human beings have the tendency to adopt the norms of those people we spend time with. Within group settings, we tend not to want to act or think or express differently from what is perceived to be the acceptable within the group. So, ideation versus brainstorm. One's not better than the other. Ideation sessions get users beyond the myriad obvious solutions often generated in the traditional brainstorming sessions. And don't get me wrong, I love a good brainstorming session. In addition to being internally focused with little structure or outside perspectives, most teams dedicate an hour or two for brainstorm. Little thought or prep work is required. Ideation, on the other hand, is a commitment. Session preparation, session execution, and idea refinement. To be successful, most ideation sessions require a time commitment of 1 or 2 business days. So, let's take a little bit of time talking about this thing called brainstorming, which you're most likely to find yourself a part of in your organization at some point. First, I love this comic. We're brainstorming here and there are no dumb ideas. But if we weren't brainstorming, that would have been a really, really dumb idea. So let's spend a little time talking about this thing called brainstorming. Group brainstorming, if done properly, can promote creative thinking, bring a team together, and help you land on the perfect idea to solve your problem. There are a number of common reasons a brainstorming session goes wrong, however. The first is an unbalanced conversation. Extroverted personalities and quick thinkers dominate the conversation, leaving no time for other teammates to contribute. The next obstacle can be what's called the anchor effect. Participants converge on the first few ideas that are brought up, which stifles new ideas and prevents the team from moving on. And the final challenge is an awkward silence. You know this one. Participants are unprepared, leaving you with an hour full of painful silence, or worse yet, a meeting that is cut short to put everyone out of their misery. Implementing the group brainstorming techniques that follow can help you avoid these common challenges and instead bring your team together to yield the perfect idea. Brainstorms typically have 3 steps: idea capture, discussion and critique, and selection. The following 8 strategies will help you and your team through all 3 stages. First, brainwriting. In this nonverbal brainstorming method, everyone writes down 3 ideas that relate to the topic of the brainstorm. Allow about 4 to 6 minutes for this to process. Then everyone passes their ideas to the person on the right, who will then build off of 1, 2, or all 3 of the ideas, adding bullet points or creative strategies. After another few minutes, everyone will pass the piece of paper again until it makes all the way around the table. Once the ideas have made it around the circle, the group then discusses them and decides which ideas are best to pursue. This technique can alleviate 2 of the biggest brainstorm pitfalls: unbalanced conversation and the anchor effect, by making sure that everyone has the opportunity to contribute and eliminating the bias towards the first idea. The second technique is called rapid ideation. In rapid ideation, everyone writes down as many ideas as possible in a set amount of time before any ideas are discussed, critiqued, or even fleshed out. For this brainstorming technique, you'll need to set and stick to a time constraint. Otherwise, you'll be risking losing the sense of urgency. This technique is the most common brainstorming technique, but isn't always the most productive. It can be helpful to avoid the all too common scenario when an idea is shut down before it has time to grow, transform, and develop.
By allowing anyone to capture their ideas before the critique begins, rapid ideation avoids the inevitable premature shooting down of ideas. The time constraint can also prevent people from talking themselves out of an idea before they share it with the group. Number 3 is figure storming. In figure storming, the group picks a well-known figure who is not in the room. It could be a boss, a fictional character, or a well-known public figure. And then they discuss how that person would approach the problem or think about this idea. For example, you might ask, how would Oprah Winfrey approach the problem? It seems silly, but putting yourself in someone else's shoes can help you and your team approach the problem in a whole different way. Number 4 is round-robin brainstorming. In a round-robin brainstorm, every member of the meeting participates, contributing one idea to the brainstorm. The first rule is that the idea has to make it around the whole room at least once before anyone can contribute a second idea or criticize or discuss any of the ideas. The second rule is that no one can say, my idea's already been taken. You can come back to that person if they need more time to think. It's also a good idea to give the team some time to prepare before this meeting. Like rapid ideation, this technique encourages and requires everyone to participate and allows the team members to get all of their ideas out before moving on to the critique phase of the brainstorm. Number 5 is mind mapping. You probably heard the term mind mapping before. Sometimes the first idea shared with the group isn't the right idea, but it sparks maybe other ideas. That's where mind mapping comes in. In this technique, the group starts with one idea and then draws lines connecting sub-ideas to the first one. Take a look at this example. Mind mapping is a visual way to approach brainstorming and can be helpful for those who think visually. Number 6 is star-busting. Star-busting is a late-stage brainstorming technique, but can be implemented when a group has already selected an idea to elaborate upon and potentially execute. In a starburst brainstorming session, your team will start with an idea or challenge at the center and then create a 6-point star around it. Each point represents a question: who, what, when, where, why, and how. For example, who is this new service targeting? When would be a good time to launch it? What is our motivation for creating this service for our residents? Because it focuses on questions rather than answers, starbursting encourages the group to examine an idea from every angle. Presenting an idea in this way frees the person who generated the idea from having to defend it or figure out how to execute it on their own. Instead, the team works on solutions together. My favorite brainstorming technique is the field trip. I fondly remember some of my teachers in public school entering the classroom and announcing, "We're going on a field trip." Moving your brainstorming outside to a casual environment or even a different floor in your building can help get new ideas flowing. Physical space plays a big part in how team members work, think, and feel. When a team is constantly brainstorming together in the same room with the same group of people, the brainstorms may feel repetitive and uninspiring. The change of scenery provided by a brand new space, even for a short period of time, can help people think differently and devise new ideas. So there you have 8 of many brainstorming techniques, but you should keep in mind some tips for running an effective team brainstorming session. No matter which technique you use, these tips can help you get the most out of your brainstorming sessions. First, allow people time to prepare. On-the-spot creativity is hard to spark, so allow for prep time. The brain is an amazing thing. Let them kind of upload all the information, and the brain will keep working on solutions even when they're not aware of it. Make sure to email your team the prompt, topic, or problem that you're trying to solve as early as possible so the team can start to come up with their ideas on their own. Second, set a clear intention. Are you looking for very feasible, we can make this happen this month ideas? Or are you looking for never been done before ideas? Make sure your desired outcome is clear before the meeting begins. Third is to invite new blood. If the same team brainstorms together each week or month, the ideas can get stale and the group can start to converge on the same few ideas each time. Inviting a fresh perspective shakes things up, so make sure that you invite people from different backgrounds and teams. And fourth, foster an inclusive, supportive environment. No bad ideas has become a brainstorming cliche, but if someone's idea gets shut down quickly, they're less likely to have the confidence and share their next idea. And finally is the follow-up. Recognize that a brainstorm serves a purpose, which is to foster new ideas, solutions, etc. But you need to follow up in order to bring these ideas to life. Make sure to set up ample time to narrow down the ideas and pursue a few in a structured manner.
As I said before, step number 2, generate alternatives, is the last on the creative side of problem solving. Let's move on to our third of 4 steps, and that is to evaluate and select an alternative. This is where many problem solving teams get bogged down. After alternatives or strategies have been identified, you evaluate the acceptability of the alternatives. Evaluate alternatives by examining the pros and cons of each one. And during the evaluation of alternatives, careful consideration is given to asking ourselves, is it practical? Is it economical? Is it ethical? Is it legal? Encourage discussion and use visual aids to help explain alternatives to people. Get technical advisors for each of the alternatives, a person who will be directly affected by your solution. The alternatives are compared to benchmark conditions to evaluate their ability to solve problems, meet quality criteria, and meet your original objective. Technical advisors can help the group evaluate the effects of each alternative and describe the impact. The effects are the outcomes or results of the strategy. Impacts are the difference between initial conditions and the effects of the alternative. Here's an example. The benchmark is a recreation budget of $10,000 per year. This is the present condition. The effect of one alternative would be a reduction of that budget to $8,000 per year. This is the effect of one alternative strategy. And the impact is a savings of $2,000 per year, but a cutback in offering a bus trip to the mall each month. This is the difference between the benchmark condition and the effect of the alternative. Alternatives are compared based on their potential to bring about the desired future conditions identified by your team. After alternatives have been evaluated, the next step is to make decisions as to which alternatives are the most acceptable to your team and other stakeholders. So, let's talk about decision making for a minute. Making decisions in the first place can be difficult, can't it? Over the last couple of days, I've talked with several people who are in the process of making life-altering decisions. But even when that decision is small, some still struggle. Don't believe me? Ask my wife where she would like to go eat out on our next date night. I googled the phrase decision making and got close to 81 million results. Here are some key decision making tips. Number 1, put it in perspective. Luckily, most of the decisions we make are not irrevocable or life-threatening. We can change our minds if it turns out that we're wrong. Number 2, information is power. Whether you are buying a car or a major appliance, weighing a job offer, or choosing a school or daycare provider, or doing research about a health condition, find out as much as you can. Number 3 is overthinking doesn't make a better decision. Once you get the information you need, weigh the pros and cons and come to a conclusion. The more you ruminate, the greater the chance that you will second guess yourself. And number 4, don't be too hard on yourself. If it turns out that the decision you made didn't turn out well, don't beat yourself up. And number 5, celebrate the right decisions you do make. Build your decision-making confidence by knowing when you make a decision you're happy with. The challenge is that if you're problem solving on your own, these tips are great. But throw in 2, 3, or 7 other people on the team asked to solve a challenge at work, and you now have the group decision-making dynamics to deal with. It's not all negative though. Group decision-making can provide a lot of benefits for an organization, as long as the group is managed correctly. Group decision-making offers superior solutions. A group is capable of generating far more alternatives than a single individual could come up with alone. And with more alternatives, it's likely that there will also be a larger number of higher quality choices leading ultimately to a more superior solution than any of the individual members could have come up with on their own. So what drives decisions? Why do we often make the decisions we do? We base it on past experience, on bias, on peer pressure. You see, underlying all of this is the assumption we truly understand our preferences and how to weigh them against each other. But what happens when freedom conflicts with power? How do you choose when two options provide you with equal amounts of fun? It's all about preference. And the underbelly of preference is bias. So what is bias? According to Merriam-Webster, bias is either an inclination or temperament or outlook, especially a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment. So why does bias matter? Well, some biases are conscious. For example, I prefer dogs over cats. I think dogs are friendly, more lovable, and less likely to scratch me. Now I've lost my entire cat-loving audience. But I don't know why I prefer the color purple over the color red. I have an unconscious, also known as an implicit bias. Unconscious bias is everywhere, and it affects the way we act and treat other people, sometimes with alarming results. It's no surprise that when a conscious choice is involved, people will prefer the option they have a positive unconscious bias for. Many years ago at the University of Western Ontario, a professor of mine did an experiment with all of us students, based on one that was done by Frederick Brochet. My professor asked us to rate 2 bottles of red wine, telling us only that one was expensive and one was cheap. In reality, he had filled both bottles with the same cheap wine. We all describe what we believe to be the expensive wine as complex and rounded, but the cheap wine is weak and flat. So why is choice so hard? Not just because of our biases. I remember reading about a study conducted at a grocery store in BC, which carried 348 varieties of jam. Someone set up a tasting booth outside the store. When the booth had 6 varieties of jams, patrons were 33% less likely to stop and sample the products than if 24 varieties were displayed. But the patrons who stopped at the 6 variety booth were 6 times more likely to buy jam than the patrons who stopped at the 24 variety booth. What's the takeaway? More choices might capture someone's attention, but sheer variety is actually harmful in converting them to customers. We might enjoy gazing at all those giant walls of mayonnaise and mustard and vinegar and jams, but we can't do the math of comparing and contrasting and actually picking from that stunning display. At this point, you get it. Choice is hard. There are some decisions that will never be easy. Think of Neo, the protagonist from The Matrix, faced with the option to swallow a red pill and discover a harsh reality, or take the blue pill and stick with the comfortable fantasy. When it comes to generating ideas or solutions, less really is more. Faced with choice overload, your superiors are less likely to buy. The trick is to find the balance between having enough options to attract them in the first place, but not so many that they become overwhelmed. There's a very simple decision-making exercise that I want to share with you to share with your team, and it's called DOTS. The options or ideas are written on Post-it notes and stuck up on the wall for the whole group to see. Each person votes for the options they think are the strongest. The only materials you need are Post-its and pens or markers. So you place all of the ideas or options up on the wall, one idea per Post-it note. Have the group cluster similar ideas or options and move any or remove any duplicates. The fewer options there are, the clearer and easier the voting will be. Check that all of the options on the wall are clear to all of the members in the group by running through them all and inviting clarification as needed. The next step is that the group will now vote on which options they think are best by using a dot, made simply with their marker on the Post-it. Determine how you want to go about this. You could set the rule that everyone gets a limit of, say, 5 dots. Then you need to decide if they can place all 5 dots on one Post-it, or do they need to distribute their 5 dots on 5 different Post-its. And 5 is not a magic number. All of this will depend on how many ideas or alternatives you have from which to choose. Next,
Once all members have distributed their dots, the group could proceed in a variety of ways. First, simply choosing the option or options that receive the most dots. Or I've seen the one where you could conduct an open dialogue about the prioritization. Explore which ideas got more dots, which got less, what the next steps could be. Or organize the ideas on a line in the wall, from most to least dots, and discuss their relative merits. It's up to you. Are you ready to move on to our fourth and final step in the problem-solving process? It's time to implement our solution. I think this comic says everything about implementation. See what you think. Listen, bringing an idea to fruition is really a four-stage process. Ensuring you cover all of these steps can make a huge difference to the success of the project. First is proof of concept. The idea is great, the whole team loves the concept, and it's been approved by senior leadership. There's still one step that you need to sort of invest time and money in, and that's proof of concept. This is the smallest viable test of the idea. Think of it as creating a mini experiment that simply demonstrates that the solution works. During this stage, you'll want to sketch out your implementation plan, start to define how you'll measure success, and select a test group. This is also when you start to refine the business case for the idea. What are the potential pros and cons? What would you expect to see if you tested it on a bigger scale? After proof of concept is a pilot. A pilot is a representative test done with a small group of people, enough so you can watch it in action and get real feedback, but not so many that you can't change things up quickly. It's likely that you'll want to get it right by running a couple of these so you can test different variations of the original idea. Remember, stay flexible and open to suggestions. During this stage, you'll want to establish clear, concise, measurable goals for future iterations, so pay attention to the details. This is the stage where you stop dreaming big and focus on the problem solving you've already done. You'll also want to consider your internal communications and rollout plan. Are you communicating your business case strongly enough? Test it. The key to a successful pilot stage is simple: feedback, feedback, feedback. Watch, listen, and participate, and don't just focus on the positive. This is your chance to significantly limit risk as long as you manage the implementation correctly. Number 3 is rollout. It's time to roll it out to your whole organization, department, or team. Luckily, you should be feeling confident after a few pilots, and all of your stakeholders should be on board. After all, they've seen clear and compelling evidence that this really is a great idea, and they know exactly how it should be implemented. Remember to consider how this new process is going to be integrated into your existing systems, and get help with producing clear training guidelines if needed. There's likely to be a few extra complexities with implementing your idea on a large scale, so feedback is still vital. Keep listening. And number 4, celebrate the benefits. So you've successfully implemented an idea, maybe with a few complexities along the way, and you better understand how your organization reacts to the new idea or innovation. Build on this knowledge. Establishing a replicable and reliable innovation process is one of the most valuable contributions you can make to the organization or your team. Continue to track the success of the initiative and make a note of any lessons learned. Make sure that you include your whole team in the discussion so they understand why their ideas matter and what a huge difference they've made. Then go out and celebrate the success of the team. So there you have it, the 4 steps to problem solving. Define the problem. Make sure you're confident that the problem you're working on is the right one. Number 2 was generate alternatives. Be creative. Reframe and rephrase and let the creative juices flow in your brainstorming. Evaluate and select an alternative. Re-examine your decision-making techniques. And finally, implement the solution through proof of concept, pilots, rollout, and celebration. I hope you found the 4 steps to problem solving informative and helpful. I'll hang around for questions for about 15 minutes, so please let me know how I can help. Don't forget that to win huge prizes, you need this code for this session, and that's the word CREATE. I want to thank you for spending the time with me, and remember, until the next time we meet, I'm Jeff Tobe, urging you to be creative and keep coloring outside the lines. Thanks, everyone.